Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello, hope all of you are doing well today. This week we have been discussing different ways of reading and how the iterations of literature, the interactions of literature with language, society, culture shape the sensibilities of individuals. So as part of that, we are discussing an important critical concept, an important theoretical concept, that is the intersection of feminism in or with literature. We have already understood what feminism is very briefly though. So, in this class we are going to develop our understanding of feminism as well as the intersections of feminism in literature, all right. So, now the question comes, is feminism still relevant in the 21st century? Whenever we read news items where the government announces some kind of reservation for women in higher education or some policies concerning women, some cynics or some short-sighted minds keep quipping, do we still need feminism? Do we still need all these reservations in the 21st century? Extending that question, we can even go further and say that feminist criticism, is it still relevant in this stage of history where the position of women is comparatively better, where women historically are at their best footing? Do we still need feminism at all? Before we answer this question, I have a couple of very startling statistical pieces. I want you to just take a look at them. Probably the answers to these questions would be evident when you go through these figures. These figures are as recent as that of 2019, 2020, all right. So, if you look at the statistics, the global statistics of the representation of women in the national parliaments, the entire globe, we realize that it is less than 25% of women are there representing, the 50% of the population. And strangely, or not so strangely, because we know the reasons by now, less than 5% of the presidential posts or prime ministerial posts have ever been occupied by women so far, less than 5%. Now, if you look at the percentage of girls in higher education, especially in the premier national institutes, either in India or even outside India, it is less than 20%. And what is strange, the so-called industry that cries time and again to champion the causes of women, even there this glaring omission is present. Less than 10% of the top positions in industries across the globe, in all the sectors put together, they are occupied by women. That means in the Fortune 500 companies, hardly 40 companies have women CEOs or women at the top positions. That means less than 10%. Now, statistically, women are about 50% of the population, give or take 1 or 2% here and there. So, if there is an equal representation of both the sexes, then why is it that such kind of glaring representation of women in these posts? I am sure by now you must have got answers to the initial questions: is feminism still relevant today? Now, going from the world of reality to the world of imagination, all right, let me take you through a couple of literary pieces, and these literary pieces are extraordinary literary pieces, these representations are from those kind of writers who have achieved extraordinary fame. So, these excerpts are taken from their writings, So, these are classics, and look at how women are represented in classics. The first one is by François Rabelais, a very well known influential French writer who wrote in the 16th century during the Renaissance, early Renaissance. When I say woman, I mean a sex so weak, so fickle, so variable, so changeable, so imperfect that nature, speaking with all due reverence and respect, seems to me, when she made woman, to have strayed from that good sense with which she had created and fashioned all things. He is commenting about the nature, and while commenting on the nature with capital N, he says probably while creating women. So, all the standards must have gone down. So, this is the great French writer François Rabelais. We have another extraordinary literary figure, Saul Bellow, a Canadian American writer, who has to his credit even Nobel Prize in Literature, and this is from his well known work Herzog. Look at this statement: it would not be practical for her to hate herself. Luckily, God sends a substitute, a husband. Of course, we must proceed with a caveat here, because we are taking some fragments of quotations or fragments of their writing and quoting it, but more or less this is representative. So, even with that caveat, these opinions hold good. They are fragments, we need to consider the entire work, and I am not taking away the literary merit of these writers, the cultural importance of these writers. Keeping all those things intact, we still need to consider these kind of so called highly objectionable sexist remarks, and especially from classics. Remember, going ahead, we have Sigmund Freud, an extraordinarily influential name in psychoanalytic criticism, in psychoanalysis especially. In fact, his writings have paved the way for psychoanalytic criticism. So, here he goes to the extent of othering an entire species, he goes to the extent of othering the entire species, because he constructs the human world according to the male anatomy. The male anatomy becomes the normal, and anything other than that becomes a kind of a deviation. That is why it is a phallocentric world. It is a phallocentric world where the male sex organ becomes the normative, and anything different from that becomes the other. Even Nietzsche, we keep referring to Nietzsche, an extraordinary philosopher of remarkable insights. So, look at what he has got to say: everything in a woman is a riddle, and everything in a woman has one solution. It is called pregnancy. Yes, this is by Nietzsche. We have George Bernard Shaw, we have even Oscar Wilde, they are very well known writers. Look at their comments, look at their portrayal of women. Women are decorative, such kind of negative projections. Women upset everything. When you let them into your life, you find that the woman is driving at one thing and you are driving at another. Unable to accommodate the interests of even the so-called other, because we think of literature as being inclusive, we think of literature as being comprehensive, something that should develop a holistic perspective. So, if this is the perspective we glean from the so-called classics, then what kind of trends are we setting, what kind of psyche are we preparing? I am sure by now you must have got answers to one of the initial questions we raised, is it still relevant? Is feminism still relevant? When we look at these excerpts, we are truly puzzled. Any sensible mind would revolt at such kind of reductivistic portrayal and pejorative portrayal of women. So, what is wrong with them? Is it is this the fault of these writers, or is it a systemic misogyny? Misogyny is hatred of women. So, is this hatred of women or underestimating of them, is it systemic, or is it just confined to those writers? I am sure you know the answer by now. So, if it is systemic, if the entire system likes that and they are just tip of the iceberg as they call, how do we sensitize our fellow human beings towards these kind of oppressive patriarchal constructions of women? So, we have something called male gaze and objectification of the female body. In fact, in feminist literary criticism, male gaze refers to the concept in which where it is said that the entire world is looked at from the perspective of the heterosexual male, who looks at women from the perspective of a pleasure. She is reduced to an object of pleasure, that is male gaze. So, an entire the other half or one half of the population is reduced to a kind of a commodity. Therefore, the objectives of feminism and thereby an extension of feminism, feminist literary criticism, is to sensitize individual towards all these things and to analyze ways and modes through which language and literature can be sanitized. We need to sanitize it so that we can carry forward meaningful dialogues related to women and their interests. Here is Virginia Woolf, a major 20th century writer, a modernist writer. In fact, her writing is credited to have initiated feminist literary movement. So, it is a quotation from her remarkable work called A Room of One's Own. All this pitting of sex against sex, of quality against quality, all this claiming of superiority and imputing of inferiority belong to the private school stage of human existence, where there are sides, and when there are sides, it is necessary for one side to beat another side. So, the entire logic of pitting one sex against the other, it is a kind of a dwarfed logic, it is a kind of a contorted imagination, because it is neither beneficial for the man nor for the woman. So, it is a kind of a contorted logic. To lay bare our internalized misogyny and rectify such inclinations, we need a feminist critique of literature even today, and we need feminism even today, because feminism is that extraordinary philosophical tool and practical tool that is essential to create equity and equality in this world. With that spirit, let us go ahead. And now is a time for a little bit of history of feminism, feminist literary movements and all that. It was in the late 18th century that Mary Wollstonecraft writes A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, a seminal work that later paves the way for the creation of feministic school of thought, feminism. So, in a sense, this becomes the Bible of feminism, the first work, the originary work. Feminism has different schools of thought. Since the 18th century, it has evolved considerably in size, in its influence, in its gamut, in its representation, in its causes and objectives. It has grown only from strength to strength. So, here we are going to take a quick look at what has happened since then. We have some important texts in the 20th century, of course, Kate Millet's Sexual Politics, Ellen Showalter's Towards a Feminist Poetics. So, we are going to take a closer look at these feminist critics, feminist theorists, and analyze what some of their concerns are, what some of their objections are as far as literature in general is concerned, what is it that they are proposing here. These are taken from their seminal works, Sexual Textual Politics, Sexual Politics from written by Kate Millet. Sexual politics obtains consent through the socialization of both sexes to basic patriarchal polities with regard to temperament, role and status. How literature becomes an agent through which such kind of sexual differences are normalized or socialized. So, as a feminist intervening in literature, your focus is to show on those modes of writing that further the so called divide that already exists, that reinforces the gender divide and also furthers the patriarchal supremacy in the world. Patriarchy, whether it is reformed or unreformed, is patriarchy still. Patriarchy is again a kind of a key word when you are reading feminism, you need to understand it. It is a system of governance, it is a system wherein the male domination is ensured in every sphere of life, be it social, cultural, political, the male dominance over the female dominance. Therefore, Ellen Showalter goes ahead and says that even women's literature is still haunted by the ghosts of repressed language, and until we have exorcised those ghosts, it ought not to be in language that we base our theory of difference, because here is a very important notion. She proposes that language per se is a patriarchal construct. The language that you and I keep using even now, it is a patriarchal construct. So, as long as we use this patriarchal construct to fight against patriarchy, it would not be effective. Therefore, we need to devise a plan, we need to devise a kind of a strategy wherein we fight patriarchy using a system which is not a construct of patriarchy. And unfortunately, language is still to this day a patriarchal construct. How is language a patriarchal construct? We are going to discuss in a very short while. Before that, two more influential names in feminism, Helen Siu and Simone de Beauvoir. Please remember, the objective of the class is not to give you an history of feminism, but to give you an outline of the objectives of feminism and its intersections in literature, so that we know how to read literature from feminist angle. So, this is by Helen Siu or Sixu. So, she proposes the concept of a creature feminine, women writing. Woman must write herself, must write about women and bring women to writing from which they have been driven away as violently as away from their bodies, like through the male gaze and commodification of the female body, as women have been driven away from their own bodies. So have they been driven away from writings. So, in order to overcome that, women must write whatever it is, be it a diary entry, do not bother about literary devices, start writing. It is only when you start writing, only when you consciously bring to fore all those oppressive forces that have kept you within the confines of home, only then would there be a kind of a solution to the problem of inequality, a creature feminine. So, here is a very interesting representation from the second sex. Representation of the world, like the world itself, is the work of men. They describe it from their own point of view, which they confuse with absolute truth. Again, we are talking about the male gaze, using language to promote patriarchal values and things like that. And since oppression happens only in a state of war, we need to fight, and this oppression is no different from any other oppression in history. Therefore, it calls for kind of a war. So, keeping these things in mind, we go ahead and discuss some of the other important concepts here. So, especially the concept of neurosexism. It is a term coined by Cordelia Fine, a well-known academic, psychologist and a philosopher. So, she draws our attention towards a cognitive bias that exists in all of us, and this cognitive bias is so inherent that it only furthers the gender stereotypes, the existing gender stereotypes. So, it is inbuilt in us. So is biological determinism. Biological determinism is a concept, is a social theory in which it is said that whatever position men, be it men or women, enjoy, whether it is in society or in politics or in culture, they enjoy it because of the inherent capacities. So, the inverted logic of this is that if there is a poorer representation of women in society, in politics, in cultural fields, that is because there must be something wrong with women, this kind of biological determinism. Earlier we were discussing how language is a male construct. Now look at it, whenever we want to curse somebody, whenever we want to curse, whenever we want to almost use foul language, all these things are centered around a female body in some way or the other. All our curse words, and look at some of our concepts, we use them almost very blithely. Chairman, in order to indicate somebody who heads an organization, we call it chairman. It's why not a chairwoman? Of course, it's only recently that we have begun using the term chairwoman or just chair, a kind of a gender neutral term. But until very recently, or even now in many contexts, it's chairman. In our own language, for instance, in order to call the president of a nation, we use the term Rashtrapati, again a highly gendered term. It's not a gender neutral term, Rashtrapati. Even though we have had a female president, we have not been able to bring out a gender neutral term to designate to that designation, to that post, president. So, feminist criticism draws our attention towards all these things, including how there is an unequal division of labor. So, what do we mean by the double shift? Supposing it's a working couple where both husband and wife are working, it's a working couple, you obviously know that the woman has to do the household chores, take care of family, and only after that is she allowed, or will she generally go to the workplace. So, how there is a kind of a double shift, apart from the household chores, she is also an earning member, whereas whereas men enjoy or share the benefit of their earning, they don't share the benefit of her, they don't share the responsibility of the household shares, how it creates a kind of a double burden. So, all these things, feminist criticism draws our attention towards how gender stereotypes are promoted through literature, how language is highly sexed, how there is a kind of a disparity between men and women in their work conditions, all these things, So, that is the reason why we need to study literature from a feministic angle, because at the end of the day, it's a debatable question. We have already taken up this question whether to look at a comprehensive structure called literature. Is there any profit in looking at it from a particular point of view or not? We have already discussed that. It's an open-ended question, or it's a debatable question. But the weight of the interventions of feminism to examine literature from feministic angles, it's highly heavy. We can't ignore, we can't simply shirk that and say literature is comprehensive, we would like to look at it holistically, we do not want to raise these uncomfortable questions, we can't say. We are going to end this session by invoking some of the well known feminist texts that are going to sensitize us towards all these broader issues. One is by Volga, a well known work called Vimukta, or Liberation of Sita. Ismat Chugdai's Lihaf and other short stories, Shashi Deshpande, Manjula Padmanabhan, Kamala Das, Amrita Pritam, these are our extraordinary writers who explore these concepts and further the theoretical concerns and objectives of feminism in a highly creative way. So, please take a look at their works. I am going to end this session with an extraordinary poem by Maya Angelou. It's like a kind of a clarion call, how despite the centuries of oppression, despite continuous discrimination, how women should not give up their cause and continue to fight. Here is a kind of a clarion call for all oppressed people. Beautiful lines by Maya Angelou. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard because I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, like phoenix, I'll rise. I'll rise. Thank you.